Thank you for joining. This is our third event in our series of uncomfortable conversations about race. I am Sharada Sullivan, and I am hosting today in my role as a board member and the chair of our IDEA committee for FEI Chicago, which focuses on inclusion, diversity, and equity for FEI here in the Chicago chapter. Today's conversation, again, is the third event in this series, and we'll focus specifically on the role of white Americans in disrupting systemic racism. And we're focusing on this topic for a very specific reason. FEI's membership in Chicago is overwhelmingly white. And through this series, we want to offer perspectives that will help our members better understand themselves and the world that we're leading in. So in today's session, Dr. Donna Marino will be sharing insights into our country's history and the role that white Americans must play in disrupting racist systems. It's likely to get uncomfortable, and that's the point. It should also be thought-provoking and hopefully actionable by the end as well. But before I hand it over to Donna, I do want to provide a brief overview of our agenda and a few logistical items, again, for those of you who have not joined us before. From an agenda perspective, we have a very specific format that we have followed in this series. So we typically start with a presentation that's 40 to 45 minutes, and that's the part that Dr. Marino will be covering for us. And then from there, we will move into small group breakout sessions where we will discuss what we've learned. And that is, again, very intentional. It helps us to process and internalize the new information that hopefully we've learned over the course of Dr. Marino's talk. At the end of those small group breakout sessions, which will last between 30 and 40 minutes, depending on how much time we have, at the end of that, we'll come back together in a large group, and you guys will have an opportunity to share anything that you discussed in your small group breakouts. You don't have to, but if you have any thoughts to share from the conversation, you'll have an opportunity to do that. I said this at the beginning, but for anyone who's joined here, please do make sure you have your video on over the course of the conversation. If you can't turn your video on, that's okay, but we do prefer to see everyone's faces for a conversation like this. For those who have not participated in a breakout room, it's very simple and painless. You'll get a note when we get to that point. You'll get a note asking you to join a breakout room, and you'll be moved into a separate Zoom room with your small group. There will be a time clock at the top that will tell you how much time you have left in your conversation, and you will have a host from our IDEA committee who will help facilitate the conversation for you. And then again, at the end, there will be a note that flashes on your screen that tells you you're about to be rejoined to the main Zoom room. So again, fairly painless. And last but not least, as you may have heard, I did ask Susan to start recording at the beginning. We will not record the small group breakouts. We want you to be able to share openly and honestly in the small group breakouts, but we do want to record the presentation for that Dr. Marino will be giving. So that's the reason that we are recording right this minute. So with that, I will introduce our speaker. Dr. Donna Marino, it sounds like is maybe familiar to some of you. You've seen her speak before, which is fantastic. She is a psychologist, an executive coach, a speaker, and an author who combines her deep professional expertise and understanding of human behavior with her knowledge of business and leadership to help both individuals and organizations excel. So with that, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for having me here tonight. And I love that you're calling this series Uncomfortable Conversations because it doesn't beat around the bush. It is uncomfortable, but when you are uncomfortable, you know that you're doing the work. And I guess a little pet peeve of mine is when we do D&I initiatives in organizations and it stays really superficial. You learn the definitions of some terms, which I'll do some of that tonight, but it doesn't go much deeper. And unless we engage in these real conversations and are willing to look at ourselves, nothing's going to change. So I just want to thank you all for showing up tonight and for, being brave enough to start diving in and doing the work. So I am going to share my screen. Okay. So as Sharada said, we're really going to be focusing tonight on the role of white Americans in disrupting systemic racism. This is not to finger point, blame, shame, or guilt anyone. This is to just look at the reality we're living in, to look at the facts, and to empower us to make a difference and to be on the forefront of social change. Okay. So in order to help us all kind of forget about our day leading up to this moment and to be fully present right now, I'm just going to invite you all, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes. And if you don't, just find a spot in your room to focus on. And I want you to tune in to the sensation of your feet on the ground. I want you to feel the floor or even the earth beneath you. And I want you to feel yourself fully supported, fully rooted, grounded. And I want you to do just a short body scan, moving from the feet to the ankles, to the shins and the calves, and just noticing what your body feels like right now in this space and in this time. Noticing any tension or tightness, noticing any relaxation, just fully coming into your body in this moment. Feeling the knees, the thighs, the glutes and pelvis. Feeling the belly, maybe feeling the belly rise and fall with your breath. Feeling your chest and your heart center. Feeling the back, your hands, your arms, shoulders, neck, your face, the back of your head, and the crown of the head. And now, feeling into your heart center, I want you to identify what your intention is for our time together today. Each one of you has actively chosen to show up and be present today. And I want you to really connect with what is the outcome that you desire? Why did you choose to show up here? And I want you to really phrase your intention. And if possible, begin that intention with I am. Such as, I am increasing my awareness of social justice. I am acknowledging my role in the system. I am taking action towards a better community. And go ahead and identify that intention. Now take a deep breath in through the nose with a loud exhale out the mouth, letting go of the day. And do that one more time, breathing in. Go ahead at your own pace. Open your eyes and just go ahead and shake out the arms and legs. Bring some movement into the body. And let's be here with each other right now in this moment today. Okay. First and foremost, tonight, we need to be safe in this space together. And so it's very important that we all together participate in creating a safe container. And so a safe environment where we can be transparent and vulnerable with one another in order to do this work. And so as part of that safety, I'm going to ask you all to suspend judgment, to keep an open and curious mind. Okay. I don't think anybody is perfect at this, at DEI. I just don't think so. I know I'm not. And I strive to do the best I can, but I make mistakes too. And the purpose of this is to dialogue, is to be open-minded about other people's experience, to listen, to understand, to give people the benefit of the doubt, and to ask questions. When you feel triggered or upset or offended by what somebody says, lean in, ask. It's okay to ask, what did you mean by that? It's okay to, if you notice that someone looks uncomfortable by something you just said, ask, how did that land for you? What's your reaction? What are you feeling? This is for all of us to become more aware and to be more vulnerable and transparent with each other. When it gets uncomfortable, I'm going to really invite you to keep engaging and leaning in, because that's how we get through this. And oftentimes the body and the mind want to escape. Suddenly you'll be planning your grocery list or, want to pick up your phone and scroll through your email. Please resist those urges, because they're just signs that it's getting hard. And so really it's getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, and even a lack of closure. A lot of these sessions, if they're done right, they're going to leave you asking questions. They're going to leave you with needing more exploration, because we cannot solve social justice in 40 minutes. This oppression has been going on for 400 years. This is a process and an experience. So just going to ask all of you to keep everything said tonight confidential and to support one another. And if afterwards you are struggling with anything, reach out to me, send me an email or contact me. I will talk with you. I will walk you through it. I will engage with you. This is an important issue, and we're not going to leave anyone high and dry. Okay, so our main goals tonight are just understanding that role of white people in race relations, and then really discussing strategies. What can you do to improve it? Okay, Sharada did a great job of introducing me, but I want to do a different kind of introduction than you get at most events. And I want to talk to you about my racial identity and my ethnicity and how I grew up, because it's the lens that we all see race, ethnicity, social justice through. So I'm originally from Long Island, New York. My father was an electrician, and he worked in Manhattan on the skyscrapers. And my mom was a registered nurse, but she stayed at home with the kids. I have 3 siblings. We were a big, loud Irish Catholic Italian family in a mostly white, blue-collar neighborhood. And that's how we grew up. My neighborhood, I grew up in Massapequa, which is known as Mazza Pizza. It's all Jews and Italians. And even though we were, 45 minutes, an hour outside of Manhattan, it was not diverse. And so my heritage is English, Irish, Italian, Czechoslovakian, and French Canadian. So I am a genuine mutt. And obviously I share that with you to just keep in mind for yourselves, like how do you come into race relations? What is your background? What is your experience? During this, please feel free to drop comments in the chat. I'm going to ask Sharada to manage that, or, just let me know if there's things in there or questions in there. And yeah, feel free to engage, ask questions, make comments. This is about dialoguing. Okay. So what is race? This is my first question, and I would love for you to unmute yourself and answer the question.
Actually, I think scientifically poorly defined.
Okay.
Other than the concept of skin pigmentation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good. So scientifically poorly defined other than pigmentation. Okay.
Which is more a social construct than it is a scientific construct.
Yes.
Yes, yes, I was going to say it's a superficial construct designed to divide us.
Yes. Okay. Anyone else want to add to that?
It's not just skin color also, because Asians have a totally different set of facial features, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. These are all good points. This is all important.
Yeah, I would say it's sort of taking national ethnicity and maybe trying to take it up a level just to simplify. Like what Skip said is, we may think of Asian as a race, but that would cover many different countries and people like simplicity. So kind of how I think about it.
And it's not only skin color and, some of those points, it's also social norms.
Yep.
Different ethnicities can have very different social norms.
Okay. This is great. Anyone else? Okay. So when I was in school, I was taught that there are 3 races. There was Caucasian, there was African or Negro, and I apologize, but this was the terminology used at the time. And then even worse, there was Asian, which was referred to as Mongoloid. Okay, this is what I was taught. There is no scientific evidence for this. Race is a social construct, and race was really created out of colonialism and as a way to take land from the natives of the area. And race, although we don't call it this in our country, is a caste system designed to put people in their place and to essentially assign their station in life. And it's a way of creating a hierarchy and deciding who has power and who doesn't. I'm sorry, I don't know all of your names, but to the one gentleman's point about people from Asia, if you go to South Africa, Japanese are considered white and Chinese are considered colored. There is, really no rhyme or reason between their classification in a lot of ways. It's white, colored, or black. Or they'll often use black to define everything that's not white, okay? And there are certain privileges with each group, including how much money you receive for education, based on the color of your skin.
Dr. Marino,
Yeah.
in countries like India, which either is trying to get rid of a caste system but still has a caste system of 5 or 6 different levels, I don't remember all the names exactly, the skin colors, I assume, are relatively similar. So how does the caste system enforce it, quote, if the people look alike?
The way they do it is basically by economic stature. So the
Brahmins
bottom of the caste system are the untouchables, and they're the servants, and basically
street sweeper.
Yeah. So
but by looking at the person, you couldn't necessarily know that, right?
Correct. I mean, you would go by how they're dressed and
their language, maybe.
Yeah. Could be language, where they live, cleanliness, because of what's available the lower you are in the caste system. So things like that. Yeah. In fact, Martin Luther King went to India, and he was at a school for the untouchables. And when he was introduced, he was called the untouchable of the United States. And at first he was like, what? And then he was like, no, that's what's going on. That's what this is. So, okay. Now, what is racism? We talked about race. What is racism?
Differentiation based on race, usually negatively connotated.
Okay.
It's systems put in place to divide the haves from the have-nots.
Okay.
I'd say it's discrimination based on ethnicity.
I think it's also assigning certain qualities, negative or positive, based on appearance, based on, just what you see.
I think it's fear. I think it's fear, and fear of the unknown or the different.
I would say it is a preconception or prejudice against people who are different than you are.
That's what I was going to say.
I would say also that, it gives one class of people more opportunity than others, than other groups.
I think that's exactly the point. It's a way of classifying people according to priority.
That's a good way of saying it, Barrett.
So I think there's a difference between prejudice and racism. I can be prejudiced, but I don't have the power to exercise my prejudice against someone. Racism is the ability to exercise dominance over someone because of their prejudices, because they have money, influence, they have systems in place.
Exactly. So racism is not an event, but an experience. Okay. So it's much larger than an event. Prejudice is that dislike of someone based on their skin color, their religion, their, something that's different from you. Discrimination is acting on that prejudice and saying, I don't like this type of person, so I'm not going to let them in my store, or I'm not going to be friends with them, or those kinds of things. But racism, the key is that power differential. I have heard people say racism is not a white thing. Racism, I have seen, Black people who are racist, or I have seen Latinx people who are racist. That is actually not true, because you have to have power to be a part of racism. And what racism really refers to is this power differential that puts one group of people at an advantage over another group. So
it's not bidirectional. Racism cannot be bidirectional, only downward.
Correct. There has to be a group that has power. And most of what people, now, someone who is not white could be prejudiced or could discriminate, but it's not racism. There is a difference because of that power differential. And I will say that most of the time when you see that, it is a reaction to the racism they have suffered. Okay, it is a reaction.
I've heard it described as racism is a system, prejudice is a feeling, discrimination is an action. And so a person of color can feel prejudice or can take a discriminatory action. But again, to your point, if you don't have power, if you can't influence outcomes, you cannot perpetuate racism. You don't have power as part of the racist structure.
Yeah. And this is a shock to a lot of people. This is how it is defined, in communities that study this. This is our current understanding of it. And that power differential is what's key. Who holds the power, right? And think about how every one of our systems was created based on this power differential, was created because we've had slavery, because of what the foundation that we've built on. And so it's really about re-examining our systems. So as a psychologist, I'm going to geek out a little bit here. So as a psychologist, everything should really fall in that normal bell curve, right? And that's the way we see normal populations. So when you see people of color all congregating at the bottom of the bell curve, this tells us our system is broken, because they should be having the same curve we do. If Black Americans, who are only 13% of the population, but 80% are in prison, or 80% are, that's not statistically possible. And that tells us that the system is racist, that there is an advantage. The only other explanation of it is a racist explanation, saying, well, Black people are more likely to be criminals. We know that not to be true. There is research to support that, there is not, drug use is consistent across races. Crime is consistent across races. It's just our systems that are structured in a way to point out the person of color. So the police system began to catch runaway slaves. That is where our police system started. And so I am not anti-police. I just want to be very clear about that. I am not anti-police. What I'm saying, from a psychological level, those beliefs get transmitted down. And I don't believe that everybody on the force is bad or that everybody is racist, but I'm saying there is an influence there, and a re-examining of the system and re-education is needed in order to change that.
So Dr. Marino, there is a question, and there have been a couple, but
Sure.
One that I think is really standing out is the Ku Klux Klan are not a racist group because they don't have power.
I would disagree. I think that they have a lot of power, and a lot more power than we know about. They are definitely a white supremacist group. And we're going to talk about what white supremacy really is in a little bit. But I think they have more power than we know.
And Roseanne is asking, and I think it's important to clarify this, because the conversation around what racism is the foundation of why we're here, why we're on the call today. So Roseanne is asking if power is the differential in whether someone can be racist or not. The example of an Asian manager or supervisor making decisions against hiring Black or other minorities, isn't that racist?
That's discrimination, because it's an individual creating an action based on prejudice. So racism is really systemic racism or organizational racism. It's a collective. Okay. So think of it as group versus individual, if that makes sense.
So this is Vanita Field speaking. I'm sorry to leap in here, but I'm from the South, and I grew up in Ku Klux Klan territory. So I can honestly say that because the KKK wore hoods, we didn't know who they were. And they were the mayors, and they were the city councilmen, and they were pillars of the community. So they did have power, and they were racist, and they are racist.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that, Vanita, and for being willing to speak up about that. And that's, I agree completely.
It seems like to me, one of the things getting a little bit overlooked is that, to me, racism is the systemic use of benefiting your group by keeping another group down. So, you can obviously demonstrate the economic benefit of keeping the African Americans down from 400 years ago, when it should have been more of a class structure, but it wasn't. And the Ku Klux Klan, even if they don't have power as a group, are part of the systemic group that has suppressed other groups for their own benefit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With organizations like Silicon Valley has a large number of Indians, but they're all primarily from the two top castes of India, and they severely against any U.S. Indian not from that caste, but the bottom caste. Do you consider that racism or discrimination only? They do it as a group. It's a power play by a group against another group, both Indians. So,
well, one of the things that people don't remember is why were all these Confederate statues erected in the early 1900s? This was a direct result of the fact that they were to tell the Black people their place, and we're going to erect these monuments to keep the Black people down. That even though you theoretically were freed, please know who's in charge here. And we're going to put up all these statues all over the South to remind everybody who's in charge.
Mm-hmm. I want to make a point about that, Skip. What other war have we resurrected statues of the losers? Okay.
We don't. We allow the German graveyards to exist as graveyards of people that fell in combat. That's it.
Right. So excellent points, everybody.
Well, it seems like to Skip's point and to your point, yes, the North won the war, but as many have said, we lost the peace.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's interesting too, because also to that point with what Skip said, the statues serve as reassurance to the people in power who are afraid of change, and to remember history and remember and reassure them that all things are going to be okay. And at the same time, it's a symbol and a reminder to those who are kept down that they're still kept down. Like it's a visual, I don't know the words, I'm losing the words, but I see nods, so I think people know where I'm heading.
Yeah. It's a visual reminder. It is a scare tactic. It's also normalizing something that is not normal, and I've, so I participated in a social justice summit a couple weeks ago that I was co-hosting with a group of coaches. And there was a woman there who said she grew up in the South and never thought about the places she was going. And I apologize, I can't remember the name of it, but this place that she would go all the time with her family, and they'd have picnics and take pictures and everything. It was the place where slaves used to be sold. And now it was like a picnic site, right? And there were still remnants and there were carvings and whatnot. It was, and it's like and unless you raise your awareness, that's just going to be normal, right? If that's the way you grew up. And that's, that's why we're all here tonight, to say, wait a second, I need to look at this again. So I grabbed a couple graphs to really help you see what systemic racism looks like in America. So this is the disparity between white homes and Black homes in terms of wealth. And you can see where Black homes have stayed very steady, even where white homes started to really trend upward, and the big difference there. This is the disparity in education. So this is about advanced placement courses and IB courses. And again, I just want to really hit home. This is not evidence to say that that Black students are not smart. That's just not true. There is no evidence of that. This is to say that they're offered a lot less opportunity. How many of us want our kids to go to the Chicago public schools over a Western suburb, right? I mean, let's all just be honest about that. Why did my family move out of the city and into the suburbs? Because we had children and it was time to send them to school. And instead of us redirecting funding, and instead of us fighting for equal education, no matter where you live, we just move, right? White flight.
That was viewed as a feature, not a bug. That was a feature of this. I'm not joking. That was a feature. We moved to the suburbs and we designed a school funding system fundamentally based on real estate values. Mm-hmm. And that was the feature of the suburbs.
Yeah.
Well, and think about right now with COVID, what we're seeing, how there's such a difference as far as like computers, just having the capabilities to be taught online is just not available to individuals. So I think that those are things that have to be addressed in the near future. It's not fair to the people that are being impacted by it.
Absolutely. And I look at the assumptions schools are making that kids will have access to internet and access to technology and computers when they may or may not. That's making those honestly white privilege assumptions. And then with COVID, the libraries are closed and stuff too. So how do kids without get what they need? And I think you're going to see really big disparities in education now. I also think that there is a big opportunity here that we're missing, but maybe it will change, where if schooling was virtual, maybe we could equalize it better. So that kids would have more ability to have access to better teachers and better curriculum based on ability rather than geography.
But to do that, you've got to solve the inequalities in access. The fact that so many in the lower income neighborhoods don't even have connectivity to the internet available to them.
Right. We would have to solve that for sure.
Well, you have to have a spare $50 a month for that. Don't you? Doesn't everybody have a spare $50 a month for internet access? That's the number.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not just that. We encounter that right now where I'm working at the school that I work at. We're in the Pilsen community. And so we have students that are very challenged to be able to participate in e-learning. So we were able, through grants, be able to provide either a reimbursement for the internet or hotspots, et cetera. And at the end of the day, we still have a lot of challenges because the infrastructure in some of the communities is not the same. Right. You cannot get the same level of service, the same level of connectivity, and even the same response. It truly is quite different.
Absolutely. And these are the problems that we need to be a part of fixing.
And for anyone who doubts the structured nature of this problem, that chart, that trend line over decades, I think says it all, right? It doesn't matter which political party is in power. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the parties have handed it off multiple times during this period. It doesn't seem to have changed the curve at all, right? So this slide screams structure.
Right.
Do you have this slide? That slide was gross dollars in trillions. Do you have that slide on a per capita basis? Obviously, it's still a disparity, but I'd like to see it, normalized, on a per capita kind of basis.
Yeah, I don't have that slide, but I'm sure you could get it online. Yeah. This is the difference in average weekly earnings from white men on down. Let me see if I can see the rest of if it ends with ends with Hispanic women. It doesn't include indigenous women. That's usually, the indigenous culture is even lower. So, but again, you can see how it goes down, down, down. And then this is incarceration, which is just ugly, just really ugly. That the Black community is policed 5 times as much as white communities. They're much more likely to get arrested for things that white people will just get a warning for, and they get more severe sentences.
A question on that topic. One of the issues that I don't know if it was resolved, but it was highlighted probably in the last 10 years, the differences between crack cocaine versus regular heroin, that the white people use heroin, but Black people use crack cocaine, and the enforcement and the sentencing guidelines for crack cocaine were way worse than regular heroin. Has that been changed or fixed?
I don't think so. I think there is less crack use overall, but crack is cheaper. So that's really, it's about availability and price. So, yeah. And the heroin problem has become very problem in wealthy white suburbs. These kids are getting addicted to their own pain meds or their parents' pain meds. And then when they can't get prescription, then they move over to heroin. But they don't get the sentencing that a person of color would get.
Dr. Marino, how would I think about those graphs on imprisonment and say the murder rate in Chicago, right? So if I think of the numbers, I believe that the murder rate in Chicago would be disproportionately committed by African Americans against African Americans. Are those graphs total imprisonments? Is there a breakdown of violent crime? If we're thinking about murder rates, are there systemic racist systems that are leading to those kinds of end results and violence and some of the things that we see in these poorer neighbors in the city of Chicago?
Mm-hmm. So it is not broken down by type of crime, but a lot of the beliefs about Black on Black crime and that African Americans create more violent crimes is actually a myth. And a lot of that is how it's portrayed. I don't know the specific statistics for Chicago. I mean, I do know our murder rate is quite high, but that also does come down to policing, and it comes down to type of murder. So white on white murder is less likely to be gang related, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right? It's done differently. I don't know if that answers your question.
Can I say something? I think a lot of the Black on Black shootings are unsolved crimes to begin with. So there's nobody in jail for those crimes to begin with.
This is okay. So could you show that graph again? I just want to make sure I understand what the graph is saying.
This one?
Yes, please. So this is not indicative necessarily of violent crime at all. People go to jail for different things other than violent crime, do they not?
Correct.
Okay, so I mean, sometimes you go to so I just want to clear that up. This is not necessarily correlated to violence. I just think that's a construct that we just need to debunk right now. And I'll put myself back on mute.
No, thank you.
And I wouldn't be suggesting that. I'm simply saying if I'm looking at numbers that say that there's disproportionate amount of African American people or people of color that are in jail relative to their representation within the population, the 13% and the 80%. We could find out, and I don't think it's just the things that we see on the news. The murder rate in Chicago, if there's 1,000 murders a year, it's not 13% of those that are being committed by African Americans. It's much higher. And so I'm trying to think about how other systems of racism have led people to places where there is violence and where there is drugs. And Doctor, you suggest there's over-policing in those neighborhoods. That could be a part of it. But if education is not good, if access to healthcare is not good, if housing is good, even access to food, people are talking about connectivity. You go into poor neighborhoods, you can't find, there's no Whole Foods, there's no Jewel, there's a lot of in play. I don't think that necessarily if, again, some of these inner city places that are more represented by African Americans, that they're necessarily, that African Americans are more violent. They're in places with other structures that create that.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you guys know, I mean, I know the news, like, no matter what side you listen to, you can't really believe what they say. But I can just tell you from firsthand, I live downtown and I follow Chicago news, not on the news stations on TV, but on like the actual stuff that gets sent out here. And I don't know if everybody here knows this because everybody else I told you, they had no idea. But the reason why the organization BLM doesn't come to Chicago anymore is because they got kicked out by the elders and the community leaders in Inglewood and the South Side because they were trying to protest the police and trying to ban the police or whatnot, or what do you call it? Defund the police and ban the police. And they said, the elders there said, no, we need the police because our kids are getting killed. Innocent kids are getting killed through like stray bullets. And it's an actual, I mean, there's a war going on right now within the South Side for territory. But so there's definitely been police mistreatment and things like that there. But most of the people, the innocent people there, they want that protection because they don't have anything else. Can it be better? Absolutely. 100% it could be better. And there needs to be more training and more development of police officers, not, and I don't want to get political here, and I'm by not at all saying police are perfect, but they just need more training right now. And that chart that shows there's a podcast, if you guys listen to it, like I was shocked when I heard it. It's called, the podcast is called Motive, and it's. Can
you find it and put it in the chat, Benny?
Yeah.
I'm sensitive to time. I want to make sure we get back on Dr. Marino's message. And I really appreciate everyone's commentary, but I do want to make sure we have the chance to continue to be educated. So.
I just want to say one thing, and then respect that we need to get back on track here. I guess one of the things I would kind of like to say to everyone is something that I do and I learned to do myself is when I look at a chart like the last one that you put up, Dr. Marino, the first thing I ask myself is, am I judging people based on this chart? And what am I doing? So what does this chart mean to me? Am I, there's so many issues that you look deeper into as a person, but then you see something like that and then you just have like that gut reaction. Everybody's guilty of it in some way, shape, or form. So where does that come from? Because I just keep coming back to personal responsibility. So I check myself, right? So before I look at this and I'm going to look at that, am I trying to oversimplify? Am I trying to make it easier for myself somehow? And then that allows me to kind of open my mind up a bit to the further, larger things.
Thanks for sharing, Jennifer. I am going to say again, we're already at 5:20 and we want to have small group discussion, which is where I think this would be great to bring out. So let's hand it back to Dr. Marino and let her make it through her content. And if you have questions, go ahead and put them in chat and I'll help facilitate. And then we can, she'll pop into the small groups and help answer any additional questions that we have.
Great. Thank you, Sharada. And what Jennifer was saying will lead into what I'm talking about now with racial conditioning. But I do want to say, please, please, please consider your sources of information. Don't go on hearsay. Don't go on one person's opinion, even if it's mine. You know, do your research, read books, read articles, you know, just always consider the source. Okay. So racial conditioning is how we think about race, and it starts very, very young. And so when you're examining what your judgment is that piece of saying, okay, what part of my racial conditioning is being triggered right now? You know, when a white woman grabs her purse when she's walking down the street and passes an African-American male, that is racial conditioning. But racial conditioning starts as early as the age of 3 or 4. And I'm going to show you, I'll jump to that in a second. So this is called the doll test. And it was done with kids ages 3 and 4. And they were given a black doll and a white doll to play with. And all the children, black or white, preferred the white doll. And then they were asked questions about the doll. Which doll is naughty? Which doll is nice? And this is a black child here pointing to the white doll as nice. And all the kids did it, black or white. That is early racial conditioning showing a preference for white skin over black skin. Okay, so before you're even aware of it, it's happening. And that's why the awareness piece is so important, because anyone who says like, I'm not prejudiced, or I'm not racist, or I don't see color, all of these are just lies. They're not. We all see color. We all, and there's nothing, you know, can't you appreciate somebody's color? Can't you appreciate who they are? Can't you appreciate their ethnicity? Absolutely. We don't need to deny parts of each other to love one another and accept one another. We need to be willing to look, as Jennifer said, what's getting triggered? What's the judgment that's happening here? Here, this ad came out in South Africa, and the people who approved the ad were both black and white. And it created such a stir that it had to get pulled. And you can clearly see how the people of color were both put under a label of bad hair, and the words frizzy, dull, dry, damaged. Over here we have normal hair. What is normal hair? How can we say what is normal hair? But now we've got that white blonde, right? And we have this one here, but it is very clear hair is a very big issue with people of color versus white people. It's a very hot topic, and this was a very discriminatory ad that represents the racial conditioning. And again, both black and white people were on this. So this is that absorbed in the black community that white hair is better, right? This is that white is better. That's what we're programmed to believe at a very young age.
Is that why the cosmetic industry came up with hair straighteners for the black community? To get rid of the kinkiness? Is that what that's about?
I'm not an expert on that. I would say that there may be some history in that, but I would not want to just guess. This is racial conditioning too, right? Being 5 times more likely to be stopped by the cops, right? Racial profiling. It's also that idea perpetuated on media that there is a lot more crime in black communities, that they're a lot more violent, that we should be nervous and scared as white people. All right, here we go, right? We remember this, right? Good times. So that's, an African-American family, but they were dealing with poverty and struggle and different kinds of stereotypes in there. That's part of our racial conditioning, our media, what our parents say, what our friends say. Okay, different strokes, right? We have a nice white savior thing going on here, right? We've got the wealthy white dad who rescues the black boys out of their, underprivileged community. and then this, right? Beverly Hills 90210, that the ideal is white, is wealthy, is thin, is attractive, all of this. Again, out of those three families, you know, which one are you watching and saying, what's the best, right? What do you want to be? A friend of mine who is in South Africa, and we do diversity and inclusion presentations together, talks about that she would fantasize as a kid about taking off her black skin and discovering that she was white underneath, and then everyone would see how good she was. A story I'll try to share quickly. I did not remember this until I started diving into this work of my own racial conditioning, was that at 8 years old, I went to this camp that was mostly white, and we had one black girl in our tent. And I remember standing with a group of white girls as they put caterpillars in her hair cream and then closed it up and put it back. And right then, 8-year-old white girls were showing white solidarity, white silence, you know, white supremacy. That was all being played out. None of us had those words or that language. And while I didn't, I wasn't actively putting bugs in her hair cream, I didn't say anything. I didn't speak up. I didn't want to be the next target. And when I recalled that, I felt so much shame and guilt, and I could just I could feel it in my throat and in my chest and in my stomach. And we hold on to this stuff. Racism is a trauma, which is another conversation that we can have another time. But it is white people experience trauma from it too, in a very different way. And I'm not trying to minimize at all I think the Black experience is much more difficult. But white people need to look at their own trauma too, and what are they replaying? So here are some terms that I do want to identify for you. I've heard people say that white privilege does not exist. You know, I am a white blonde woman. When I get pulled over by the police, I know I'm probably going to get off with a warning. I know that. And if I don't, I'll get a ticket, and I'll probably get a ticket for something else to minimize my points on my license. Or I had one night, I was driving home from work and the light turned yellow, and yellow means speed up. And so I was going through and the light turned red, and the police were behind me, and they pulled up next to me, looked in my truck, and went around me and turned. And so I knew they saw a white blonde woman driving a high-end vehicle, and they just left. You know, my Black friends don't have that experience. That is a perfect example of white privilege. White Fragility, which is an amazing book, by the way, and I highly recommend that everybody read it. I actually think it should be required reading in all schools. But white fragility is that defensiveness that comes up when we start looking at these issues. And it has to do with fear. It has to do with discomfort. I mean, frankly, when you've been the one with the privilege, who wants to give that up, right? I mean, that can be really scary for people. That's what a lot of this fighting is about. Even if you don't want to recognize your power and your privilege, you don't want to be disadvantaged. And you're basically saying, like, I don't want what they have. But really, it's just about evening the playing field so everyone has a fair chance. When people get scared and defensive and think they're going to lose something, it's not that they're losing, it's we're bringing people up so we all have a fair chance. The white solidarity is that white people stick together. When a racist joke is made, nobody says anything. You don't correct another white person for their comments. It is this silent agreement that we stick together. The white savior, like that different strokes picture, and a lot of movies out there. The Green Book, I think it was called, The Help. These are really all white savior movies, which depict that that people of color need a white person to come in and rescue them. And we have to become aware of these messages and how these things play out in our lives. White supremacy, which I didn't have on here, is simply when people, I mean, nobody would want to be called a white supremacist, right? We think Ku Klux Klan, and that is it at its extreme. But white supremacy is the often unconscious belief that white people are better than people of color. And when you see something like someone saying, well, white people are smarter or harder working or whatever stereotypes, that is all white supremacy. It doesn't have to be taken to the level of a white supremacist group. And it's important for us to acknowledge our own white supremacy in order for us all to heal. I promise I'm almost done, guys.
I was just going to pause for a second. I want to ask, so we are running a little over, but I think it's been great content and great dialogue. We don't normally have this much interaction during the speaker content, but again, I think that's a fantastic thing. So my instinct is to spend more time on the presentation. And for those of you who want to stay for small group breakouts, we'll probably go a little long, and I'm happy to stay on and facilitate small group breakouts and go a little late. But I think it is important to get through the rest of the content. Everyone good with the course correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
My question that I had real quick was the white savior and the solidarity, kind of a little bit more about the solidarity. I was wondering if you could, I think from what I hear from friends and others and things, there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, with the solidarity, because then, you know, they might say, well, Black people stick together. And they use the Bill Cosby example for why didn't the women, you know, come down and criticize Bill Cosby in the Black community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of feel like those are things that need to be touched on, if you don't mind, if you could.
Yeah, I don't mind. I'm going to go back there for a second. Again, I think a lot of it comes down to the power too. What does white solidarity do? It diminishes somebody's power by not speaking up, you know, like with those girls when I was 8 years old. You know, I stayed in the group. I didn't say anything. I didn't tell anyone. You know, I didn't take the caterpillars out. So we stuck together, and you can say Black communities stick together too, but again, they lack the power. And even in the Bill Cosby case, Black women do not have a lot of power, you know, they have less power than Black men. And then here's a wealthy, looked up to by the white community, Black male. So I think when there are those power differentials, it's just not the same. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Dr. Marino, I have a question. The racial conditioning is unequivocally tied to the Caucasian race, or the counter definition of racial conditioning would be prejudice when we're talking about a race that is not in a position of power.
So racial conditioning is across races. We all have it, and a lot of it is on an unconscious level. It's what we observe in our communities and in our homes. It's expectations of different races. You know, like I said that, my friend who dreamed of having that white skin, right? So she's Black, and she still had the conditioning that white is better. It would be better if she were white, and there's something wrong with her skin. Another thing, her mom used to straighten her hair, right? And sometimes her hair would burn, but her mom also didn't want the rest of their family, of the Black community, to know that she was straightening her hair. So it was like both this, we have to fit in with white people, and this like shame of betraying her group. So it can be very complicated, and it can be a lot of different kinds of messages, and across races, as well as what you internalize, like the children picking the dolls, and even the Black children, thinking the white doll is nice and pretty and this, and the Black doll is bad and naughty. I mean, that stuff gets internalized really young from what is happening around you and what you're observing. Okay. These are good questions, and I appreciate it. Okay, so what's the problem? Why is this all happening, right? Why are we still living in white privilege and white savior? And why is our racial conditioning like this? Why do we believe these things? A good part of it is a lack of education, right? I said in the very beginning, I remember learning in school that there were 3 races. Like, I had to re-educate myself through my awareness and be like, what? In our schools, we don't really teach the truth about our country. We leave a lot out. And then we call February Black History Month, but aren't people of color a part of our history? Like, why are we separating them out instead of having that intertwined in all of our history, throughout our history? There's a lot of problems with how we're educated around race and racial issues, and what needs to happen as far as doing our own work. And this is a big thing as white people, like what you're doing tonight, showing up and diving in when you don't have to, and making the choice to be here. You really need to educate yourself. And my daughter does a lot of speeches at things like this, and she's only 13. And I'm reminded of her saying, that doesn't mean asking your Black friends what this is and what that is. Like, you have to do your own work. And again, like, what are your resources? So, read books, read scientific articles. Yes, it's fine to have conversation, but it's not people of color's responsibility to educate the people in charge, quote unquote, right? It's our responsibility. Another issue that gets in the way, though, of us doing this and having these conversations is this good-bad binary. And so Robin DiAngelo in White Fragility talks about this. We have made this, if you do this, you're a racist and you're bad. And if you do this, you're not and you're good, right? So everybody wants to feel good about themselves. And so nobody wants to admit their racial conditioning, their prejudices, what's going on, because they're afraid of getting thrown into the racist bucket. And then they're a bad person. And we're talking about character. As soon as you make that division and make it about character, people stop doing the work, because if they explore this, it's too threatening. That's when the white fragility gets triggered. And so what we really need to do is help people move into education and help, like I said at the start of this, like, we're not here to judge one another. We're not here to shame or guilt one another. We're here to learn together. And we really need to open up to curiosity and to trying to understand other people's perspective. And I'll give an example this summer. So my daughter, the same one I told you about, organized weekly Black Lives Matter protests. And when I say Black Lives Matter, I'm not talking about the organization, but I'm talking about the movement, which I believe are two different things. So a man pulled over, and at first they thought they were going to get hassled. And he pulled over and he just asked, my husband happened to be with them, "What is this all about? I don't understand." And my husband said, "It's just about creating an even playing field for all, so we all have the same opportunities." And the guy said, "Oh, well, I believe in that. Keep going." And he went on his way. It's those opportunities for education and for people to ask questions that helps us get out of this, well, you're bad even if you ask, or you're bad if you say the wrong thing. I said at the beginning, I make mistakes too. So let's just all learn together. And then this idea of, so progressive whites, and in Robin DiAngelo's book, she does say, progressive whites are part of the problem, because we're saying we're not racist and we're not this and we're not that, but we're not really acting, and we're not really diving deep into our own stuff. We've just decided that we're not, and that's not good either. You have to do the work and you have to act, which brings me to, what do we do about it? Okay. So the summit that I just worked at, we kind of created this framework. And if you want, the organization is called Rising Awareness. If you go to risingawareness.org, you can learn about them. And we're trying to create a social movement. And so the first thing is what we're doing right now, which is awareness, doing the work, becoming aware of your own responses. One of the things in the very beginning, we tapped into our bodies. You guys remember that, right? In the mindfulness, we tapped into our bodies and sensations in our bodies. This racial conditioning lives in our bodies. The trauma of racism lives in our bodies. Heightening your awareness of how your body reacts when you're in the presence of someone in color, when you suddenly feel uncomfortable in the conversation, noticing those things are cues to your awareness and are an opportunity for you to say, like, why? What is the judgment that's happening right now? What is the fear that's getting triggered? And the education piece is part of the awareness. Advocacy is starting to do something about it. Okay, so that is breaking the white silence. That is when you see something not right at work, a racist joke, or someone getting passed over for a promotion, or, you say something, but it's also, maybe mentoring someone to move into a leadership role, opening doors for people and creating opportunities where they might not have had one before. So I want you to think about it as it's both shutting down and opening up. And that's the best way we can be advocates. Allyship is friendship, is community, is the conversation, is what we're doing right now. And you can be an ally with people of color. Also, white people can be allies for each other. So everybody on this call right now is showing allyship. They're showing up with an interest and concern for social justice and changing the way we work with race in America. And so whites that are allies would believe that and help move the movement forward. And when we're allies with our friends of color, we listen, we ask them what they would like us to do about it, if anything. Okay. That white savior thing is kind of that jumping in and taking over and deciding what needs to happen. We have to open up the conversation. And again, sometimes we're going to make mistakes. We're going to think, oh, I was being an advocate, but that wasn't really what this person wanted. So, we're all doing the best we can in this, but that allyship is that cohesion and creating the bridge between races. And activism is really moving the ball forward. Okay. So advocacy, if you think of how we talked about individual versus collective, advocacy is more that individual moment, where activism is on the large scale. So that is writing your representatives, that is showing up to vote, that is, it could be marching, it could be protesting. It is really showing up in a bigger way and fighting for what you believe in.
Thank you everyone for engaging throughout the conversation. It went differently today and it was great. So thank you all for just making it your own and asking questions as they came up. I thought that was fantastic, and I learned a ton from the questions.